welcome back to the channel. This is Knightsbridge Music. Stay with us to the end of the interview because Sam Evans sheds some light on what it's really like to be a conductor here in London. Sam Evans, thank you very much for joining me. How are you and how is this festive season ahead of us looking?
It's looking good, thanks. Yeah, it's going to be busy. All my choirs have got nice Christmas concerts lined up, and I've got some singing. I'm back at the Ned in London with Gareth Malone. Christmas with Gareth Malone is a big thing at the Ned, and I'll be there singing some jazz stuff with him. It's going to be fun.
I love it. I think we've got to thank Gareth for quite a lot of our careers, or I certainly do. I don't know. Do you feel the same?
Oh, I absolutely do. And I hope it doesn't sound too sycophantic, but I mean, because he's an old friend, we were at the academy together, but I mean, he has genuinely changed the game. I think there is absolutely no doubt about that. I think the way he has made singing so much more popular and so much more accessible to people is really huge. I mean, when I was growing up, if you sang in a choir as a non-professional singer, it probably meant you held a score in your hands and you were probably doing something by Handel or Mozart or something, choral society rep. And of course that still goes on and that's still very popular and that's wonderful. But I think what Gareth has done is he's opened up so many other different types of choirs. And I mean, something like Battersea Power Station Community Choir, which I now run, that's the sort of choir that Gareth has really inspired up and down the country.
I've seen you work with choirs, Sam, and in my humble opinion, I think you're great. I'll pay you later, don't worry. But if you were bottling some of that Evans magic, what is your kind of philosophy with choirs?
I think it all has to be based on the belief that everybody can sing. And I do truly believe that everybody can sing. I mean, I hear people come up to me, I'll say, "Oh, come to choir." And they say, "Oh, no, I can't sing." And I say, "Are you quite sure? What do you really mean?" Because sometimes what they mean is, "I can't read music." Or they mean, "I'm not willing to put myself in a position where my singing might be judged, either by you, the conductor, or by other people." Or I'm simply not confident enough to sing. So sometimes I just, talk with them a little bit and say, just come along and give it a go. And I mean, everybody can sing. So I think it's got to be based on that.
I sometimes wonder, in my approach to conducting, right, I'm obsessed with this idea of being liked. I find it difficult being up there and like everybody not having a good time. You know what I mean? But do you think that's a bit of a modern phenomenon? Because in the past, some big names, they weren't exactly popular on the podium, were they? So what's your opinion on that?
I don't think I think it's a false choice between being liked and being exacting. I think you can be exacting, but be liked at the same time. I think a very, very important. I mean, everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants to sing better. They want to sound better. The conductor wants that. They want them to sound better. We're all ultimately striving for the same thing. The difficulty is when the conductor doesn't create a place of psychological safety in the rehearsal room. And I think that was very prevalent in previous generations. And I think it's slightly symbiotic, actually, because I think that some choir members believe that they're only getting the really proper experience if they're being berated by somebody angry on the podium. And I've heard people say it, they leave rehearsals and they say, "Oh yes, well, they were really cross with us tonight, weren't they? It was a really good rehearsal. I got a good sound beating from my conductor, and that makes me think I had a good rehearsal." But actually, does it make it any better? Does it actually make the sound better? I don't believe that it does. And I think you can be exacting, but you've got to be enabling. It's not good enough just to say, "That sounds awful, do it better." Well, how? How are they supposed to do it better? Try harder? Maybe that'll make it better. But if you don't give them the tools to do it, I mean, a football coach might say to their team, "Play better." But if they haven't done the training in the run up to the match, how are they supposed to play better? I mean, this used to be the case. I mean, I'm Welsh and I'm a huge Welsh rugby fan. I remember in the 90s when Welsh rugby was in desperate straits. I used to hear my dad and his mates say, "Oh, they just don't play with enough passion. They've got to want it more." Well, it doesn't matter how much they want it. If the other team are training like professionals and they're just turning up on Saturday having a bit of a kickabout, it doesn't matter how much they want it. They're not going to win. So you can't just say to a choir, try harder, sing better. You've got to train them.
Surely that berating that some choirs used to get or get currently, let's say, surely that creates tension, and tension, in my understanding, is the enemy of good, solid vocal production. I know we can argue about exactly what that is, and you hear this phrase, support more, hit those high notes. What's your take on that?
Oh my God, you're triggering me, Ben.
I thought this might be a bit of a triggering session.
Hit those high notes. Right. A few things to say on all of the things you've just asked me. I want local papers to survive and exist. But when they write about music and singing, I want them to stop using the headlines. They'll be hitting the high notes on Saturday, because nobody's going to be hitting anything, certainly not any high notes. They might be achieving high notes through a good alignment of the body, energized and active breath, good resonating space, all of those things, but they won't be hitting the high notes. Tension is absolutely the enemy. If I want to think of sport, I mean, it's such a useful way to understand singing, I think, because singing and sport are done by muscles, and muscles coordinating with one another in a highly complex system and in a very energized way. If you watch a tennis player play with tension in their racket arm, what's likely to be the result of that? They're not going to play very well. They need freedom. They need athletic potential. And I say in my teaching, in my singing teaching all the time, I don't want it to be tense. What's the opposite of tense? And people say relaxed. And I'll say not quite. Because if I'm sitting watching the telly, I'm relaxed. But I'm not in the state of athletic readiness that I need to be in when I sing. So if you want your choir to sing well, you need them to be in a state of athletic readiness, not tense, but also not relaxed either. And going back to your question, I think you're exactly right. Berating your singers is going to result in tension, which is the opposite of what you want.
In terms of choral societies, a great iconic tradition here in the UK, especially. What is the future of choral societies? Are they safe, or are there things that perhaps need to be adapted for them to have any sort of longevity?
Very good question. That I think there are certain there's music that has stood the test of time for a very good reason. One thinks of standard choral society repertoire, Handel's Messiah, Mozart Requiem, for those sorts of things, Mendelssohn's Elijah. They are great dramatic works with beautiful music. When performed with an orchestra and wonderful soloists, it's a really great experience all round. You might argue that one threat to choral societies is that people these days are perhaps less familiar with musical notation than they were in the past. I think that's probably true, that there's less formal music tuition going on generally. But I also think there's an attitude that if you haven't learned something by 18, you'll never learn it. Why can't people learn to read music later in life? Of course they can. People learn to do all kinds of things later in life, but they leave school and they go, oh, well, of course I'm not musical. What they mean is, I didn't learn to read music, and now my musical life is over. It's not over. I mean, the two choral societies I conduct at the moment, and I've conducted others in the past, one is auditioned, the other is unauditioned. In the end, on the concert day, can you tell the difference? I don't think you can. And I know that there are people in both choral societies who don't read music very well at all. Now, yes, they might have to go away and do a bit more work on their own, learning their parts. And I might have to do a bit more teaching by ear in the rehearsal. But so what? At the end of the day, the result is the same and everybody has a wonderful concert. So I don't think that it's, if it is true that there is less formal music tuition happening in schools, resulting in fewer people who leave school being able to read music notation, I don't necessarily think that's a barrier to choral society singing. I also, in a way, think it might be a good thing. Why would he say that? Because I think too many people and too many choral conductors of choral societies, I'm afraid, think that the purpose of singing is to avoid error. I come to choir so that I can avoid making mistakes. And the job of the conductor is to point out all the errors that people make, and that's what makes a good rehearsal. I couldn't disagree more strongly and profoundly with that idea, but I think it's everywhere. I often say to my choirs, let's sing that again. I don't care about the notes. Sing whatever you think sounds good. Ultimately, we'll fix it. Ultimately, they will learn the right notes. But what choir isn't is 2 hours of watching people deciphering code. And unfortunately, that's what it ends up being a lot of the time. And they go, right, I've just found a bit of music on my piano. It's for descant recorder. They sit there and they go, right, I'm going to spend the next 2 hours staring at this code and attempting to decipher it. But that's not singing. We're not having a communal musical experience. We're not learning how to engage the audience with this amazing text that we're singing. We're not arranging our bodies to make the most vibrant, energized, spinning sound we can possibly make. So I think we've got to move away from that. I'm not saying everyone should go into the concert not knowing the notes and sing a load of cacophony, but that never happens anyway.
A valiant a valiant answer. I'm totally blown away and sidetracked. That's excellent. I wonder if people are a little bit scared about, or embarrassed perhaps, about not knowing how to decipher this magical code. And I think that's only exacerbated by the tradition we have in the UK, that there are certain a beauty in a certain choral sound which is created by trebles, and that we're in the process of trying to perhaps emulate that style. And as I'm sure you'll agree, for women, middle-aged, whatever, that is not a thing that is it is the right approach, surely.
I completely agree. I'm a former King's choral scholar myself, and that have a great love and affection for King's and the choir of King's College, Cambridge, and all of that. But you've touched on two really important things there. One is the sound that people are trying to make, and the other is the culture of how we learn music, how we experience music together. When I was at King's under the great Sir Stephen Cleobury, in order for Stephen to take a ragtag bunch of boys in their late teens, undergraduates who were all idiots to a greater or lesser extent, and turn us into some kind of professional outfit, he had to be very strict and exacting, because King's had a reputation and has a reputation that, the notes are right. And we'd have 1 hour of rehearsal per evensong. And evensong was usually attended by hundreds of people. You'd have, even for, a Tuesday evening evensong, there's hundreds of people outside the chapel every time wanting to come and hear you. So every day's a performance. You've got 1 hour to rehearse that music. So you've got to get it right straight off the bat. But that does create a bit of a culture, which then goes into the wider world of the whole point of music is to avoid error and, rehearse at the greatest possible speed and all the rest of it. Then the bigger point you raised is about the type of sound we're trying to make. Now, King's has been totally bound up with the whole concept of Christmas music in this country for a century now. I think the anniversary of Carols from King's, the 100th anniversary, was last year, on the radio at least. And it is a very particular type of sound, as you say, made by boys, prepubescent boys, singing in a chapel, the acoustic of which is one of the true glories of the world. Not everybody has that luxury. And when the top line in your choir is not sung by prepubescent boys, but adult women, I don't think it's reasonable to ask them to sing in that way. I also think sometimes they are making themselves try to sing in that way because that's what they also like. And there's another thing that's happened. We're touching a lot of things here, Ben. There's another thing that's happened over the last 40 or 50 years. The historical informed performance revolution, early music revolution, whatever you want to call it, with CDs, with a certain generation of British choral director who liked a very straight sound, a sound that has no spin or natural effervescence, but is straight toned. They happen to like that because that has been recorded so much by so many very highly skilled, often quite young adult women. That's now considered the gold standard. And I don't think it has to be like that. And I don't think it's it doesn't create the best results. I'd much rather have, if I've got a choir of adult women in front of me singing the soprano line, I want to hear some vibrancy and effervescence and dynamic flexibility in the sound.
Again, Sam, the insight is brilliant, and it makes me it does make me a little speechless because it's great. I'll give you a little sort of anecdote, I suppose. I was conducting a rehearsal the other day and finished this piece, and I thought that was really, really good. I was just so proud of the choir, you know. And one of the singers turns around and goes, "But Ben, on page 2, we're actually meant to be pianissimo, and we've actually, you know, the performance wasn't good because we weren't doing the dynamics." I know this is quite an esoteric point, but what's your? There's 2 points there, I suppose. What's your opinion on that sort of it being a collaborative process, the singers kind of getting involved in the rehearsal, and how do you deal with a bit of negativity, perhaps, if it's perceived in that way?
Sometimes if a choral conductor, if their style is naturally up and encouraging, if that's their teaching style, there will be people in the choir who think they're getting a less good product because they want, going back to what we were saying before, they want to be berated by an angry person, possibly with an FRCO after their name. So I'm not disparaging my organist colleagues.
Well, you have, but it's fine.
Sorry. But, you know, getting told off by an angry man, you know, is what some people consider to be the gold standard for choral singing. Then there is also the thing where people go, well, I'm observing the dynamics. Why should so-and-so down the row be singing louder than me when it's marked piano? And why is the conductor not picking up on that? What is the priority? Is the priority to enable everybody in the choir to sing with freedom and passion and connection with the text and communicative power with the audience? Or is the priority to observe with total accuracy everything that the conductor put in the score relating to dynamics and all the rest of it? I'm not saying you have to have either or, but for me, I would rather have a performance, a rendition of something where I felt like you just described at the end of that, I'm so proud of the choir. Wow, they sang it was so thrilling to hear their singing, than say, well, as the person you just mentioned, you know, well, actually, I think you'll find that it's marked piano, and we were certainly mezzo piano, maybe even mezzo forte. Well, what even are dynamics there for? Well, there's a culture, isn't there, when you're in music education of, yes, it was good. I think you could do more with the dynamics. What does that even mean? Do more with the dynamics. It's like when people say to singers, you could do more with the words. Do more what? Do more communicating the power of the text. That's different. But if you say do more with the words, what people do is they just spit it out. If you say to kids all the time, you could do more dynamics, then people leave school and go into their adult lives thinking the whole purpose of music is to do dynamics. That's why composers sat down to write music in the first place. we're doing Dream of Gerontius. Why did Elgar write it? So that he could write dynamics. He put the dynamics in to help to give signposts to the performers about how he felt the music should unfold and how he felt the music's communicative power would best be put across. If they aren't faithfully observed all the time by every singer in the choir, but you still have a thrilling performance, I still think you've won.
I wonder if dynamics are a last vestige of control by sort of gatekeeper conductors who wish to express, who wish to, sort of keep a grip of their music for a long time. That's unkind, and I'm sure that's not the case. But it is interesting, though, that say composers like Bach and Baroque composers didn't express dynamics as frequently. They assumed that the performance would have the musicality to shape the music. It's interesting, isn't it, how it's quite a modern phenomenon?
That is a really interesting point. I think you just said gatekeeper conductors. Did you mean gatekeeper composers?
I did in fact mean gatekeeper composers.
But it's interesting that you said conductors, because actually I think the phenomenon applies to conductors as well. Because I think it gives them, again, control, something to tell the sopranos off about. Come on, sopranos, it says piano. It's got to stop.
They're all of a kind. The dynamics are of a kind. Pianissimo does not have you don't get your decibel meter out, do you? And go, oh no, you're a little bit, above pianissimo.
Exactly. If I say, if I do this, if I go, and I do this, I had much more energy in the second one, but it was less loud. But people just think that dynamics is about volume. And then what happens is, for singers, they get into all kinds of problems because they're like, well, if I don't sing very quietly, that conductor's going to tell me off. And so I'm going to do whatever I can to close my body down, close my resonator down, bring my energy level below stalling speed, and then it goes flat. And then the conductor says, it's flat. You just go round and round in these circles. It's a nightmare.
Impossible. Look, Sam, I've been so lucky that you've come on. I think I asked you about 8 months ago or something to make an appearance, but we've finally got around to it. So really, really great, and I hope that people will enjoy things. I suppose I should ask what should we entitle this video? Is there anything that occurs to you that we should perhaps call this?
I'm scared to go to choir and what I should do about it. I don't know.
I'll play with that a bit, maybe tinker it, but I think that's really great. Hey, look, Sam, thanks so much, and best of luck, with everything, with the festive season. I know it's busy. You just started, haven't you, conducting a new choir, Harrow Choral Society?
Yes.
And if you had their concert yet, is that coming up?
We have had the first concert, actually. We did a recital in October, and then there's a Christmas concert. And the lovely thing was, it was quite late. It was in June that they were looking for somebody and appointed me. And I hadn't really met the choir, I didn't really know them, but they said, we need a concert program for October, and you can do whatever you want. So I just took the opportunity to put down loads of music that I love. So I just got to conduct loads of things that I love from childhood, from singing in Kingston Parish Church Choir when I was 8. And I got to conduct that and do that with the choir. But we've got a full Christmas concert with our guest reader, Jane Asher. We'll be in the Harrow Speech Room on the 17th of December.
Sam Evans, thanks so much.
My pleasure, Ben.